From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. What is the largest land predator on Earth? If you guessed whale, you're not... I'm sorry.
You're not alone.
You're not alone, and you're wrong. Broadcasting from the churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tanchman.
The tiger
Time for some Pod Therapy.
A lot of people don't know the tiger shark can chase you 100 meters on land.
I watched the Jaws movies this week.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Did you know that the guy who directed those, when he retired, he dedicated the rest of his life and his money to like shark-focused causes to undo the killing of sharks.
The same guy direct all of the sequels? Is that what you mean? Because Spielberg directed the first one.
Yeah.
No, maybe I'm thinking of it. Producer, writer, somebody.
No, because Spielberg only directed the first one. There were 4 of them.
Oh wow. Okay.
So it might the same guy might have directed the other 3. I
maybe
don't
it's
know.
the writer, creator. I don't know, but somebody who was like an originator of that thing. He, I guess, spent the rest of his career trying to save sharks because Jaws had done got a lot of them killed, a lot of people scared of sharks.
I thought it was on AMC a few months ago. I watched it. I feel like it held up.
I've never seen Jaws.
Is great. We went to the drive-in and saw Jaws and Jaws 2
cool.
in the double feature on the drive-in.
How was the
awesome.
drive-in?
Oh, the drive-in is fun.
I've been meaning to go try that out, but then I always think it's too hot because if you're going to watch it, don't you? Because did you watch it in your truck?
We did. We pulled the truck in backwards with like blankets and pillows.
That's the
and
way
stuff.
to do it. See, I feel like if you're not going to do it in a truck, or if you have like a big
okay, so the same
van,
person did not direct all the others.
Yeah, if you're going to watch a drive-in, I feel like you have to be outdoorsy. I don't want to just sit there leaning over my steering wheel,
right,
with the AC blasting.
Yeah.
So I feel like you have to be in the bed of a truck. But what time did you? But it also has to be dark, or else they can't show it.
Yes.
But it doesn't get dark here until 9 p.m.
How is something?
How did okay?
The movie starts the first. So the double feature. There's a double feature.
You didn't watch the matinee, the drive-in,
and we do both of the double feature movies, which
Okay.
a lot of people just come and do the first movie,
Okay.
and leave. We've done it twice now.
Oh,
We've done the double feature twice now. The first one we saw Goonies and Gremlins,
oh,
Goonies.
cool.
Love Goonies.
and which I hadn't seen Goonies in a long time. That didn't hold up nearly as well as I thought it would.
Really?
No,
Yeah.
Goonies wasn't good back in the day.
Battlefield
I
Earth,
loved
Jim.
Got way too. I feel that my point is made for me.
No
Battlefield
one-
Earth's quality.
No one
Good
who
budget.
defends Battlefield Earth gets to have opinions
The
on
Goonies
movies.
got way too much love. It was always this quirky cult classic. It wasn't even that good. It was just not a good movie. I watched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids this weekend. You know that?
And how was that?
Rick Moranis is wonderful. Say something else. Say something that's not. You agree? Rick Moranis is fantastic.
Rick Moranis is fantastic.
He is fantastic. I like him. Do you know why he retired from Hollywood and no longer?
Yeah, it
made
was something to take care of his kids or something.
Yeah,
right?
his wife passed, and so
Yeah.
he decided to take care of his kids and just live a normal life, and
Yeah.
took care of business.
Which apparently he's thinking about coming out of retirement to do something
Yeah.
coming up. And I forget what that something is.
I guess they tried to approach him to do a Ghostbusters reboot.
Yeah.
Have you seen? Oh, this should have been part of the Patreon. See, now I'm thinking of all these interesting things that could have been part of the Patreon, but I'm going to incorporate it into the real show. Did you see the petition to reshoot Home Alone with Macaulay Culkin, who is currently 39, as 9-year-old, and nobody acknowledge it? They want to reshoot the whole movie, recast Macaulay Culkin as the 9-year-old kid, Kevin McAllister, and then nobody acknowledge it. There's a petition going right now. I've signed it. I think it's a great idea. That is the only circumstance in which I would rewatch Home Alone.
That is not something that needs to be a petition. That's a GoFundMe.
That's somebody needs to shoot that independently.
Yeah.
God, what a good.
That's a Kickstarter or a
just
GoFundMe.
39-year-old Macaulay Culkin, and so they contact. Or the petition says have 38-year-old Macaulay Culkin play Kevin McAllister shot for shot in a Home Alone remake, and this got to Macaulay, and on his Twitter he retweeted it, and his only comment was, "I'm actually 39."
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think he's ready to take the gig if he can get it. So
yeah.
I'm a big fan. I think that would be a fantastic idea. Sign the petition. So we have a letter here about media and about Hollywood and cinema, and the overlap it has with our profession as therapists. Hey, everyone but Jacob. And a special hello to everyone else but Jacob. Hey, I like the cut of this person's jib. It's better
we'll
than
take
all
it
the
now.
other people. Hey, did we just stop recording?
That's my
weird.
favorite letter ever.
During these COVID times, I've been doing what a lot of other folks have been doing and revisiting TV shows, movies, books, and video games that I've already completed. The familiarity has been comforting, I guess, as everything in the world is all over the place, to say the least. And I know exactly what's going to happen with Scott Pilgrim and Ramona Flowers. Yeah, I just watched that one the other day. God, it's such a good movie. It still holds up. The reason I'm writing is that I'm in the process of rewatching The Sopranos and replaying Grand Theft Auto 5, both of which have a main character in therapy. It was GTA 5's delightfully awful Dr. Friedlander that got me thinking, what are some of your favorite or least favorite depictions of therapy in movies, books, TV, and games? Is there a fictional therapeutic relationship that you think nails it in terms of realism, or do you exclusively cringe at the way your profession is portrayed? Thanks so much for the show, guys. Hearing you give advice to other listeners helps me process issues in my own life. It's nice to be reminded that we're all on our own journeys, but the paths we take can often be the same. Thanks, John DeLong, a.k.a. John the Scoopricon.
Thank you, John.
I like that name. We've had this question, or similarly before, where we've discussed therapists in the media, and I think of that as a very broad tent. I think fictional therapists that don't really exist, and then I also think therapists in the media, like your Dr. Drew's,
Oh, okay.
your Dr. Phil's.
Because those are two different categories, definitely.
I think of them as in the media. And it's interesting, I cringe more at the real guys than I think I do at the fake ones. Because the fake ones, I don't know. Like, I do yell at the screen sometimes if there's like a HIPAA violation or something. That would never happen. And also, I think artistic media tends to need the therapist. I think we play one of two roles in artistic media. We end up being a train wreck ourselves, and that's the hook. Is this person you go to fix your life has a broken life, which is fine. You know, okay, I think it's such an obvious trope at this point that I don't understand why it's still interesting to people. Or it's the therapist is nothing. They are a mirror through which to see the protagonist and develop insight. Right. Which is, I think, closer to the truth of what we do, but is an interesting, like, rhetorical device in artistry to kind of nail it. So I don't know. I think that's kind of where I've seen it be used.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. So the Dr. Friedlander or whatever.
That's in Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah. Because I've never seen. I know.
Okay.
I've played it.
Sorry.
I've never watched Sopranos, so I can't speak to that.
I can.
The Dr. Friedlander one, it's been a long time since I played that game, but I do remember playing that game and just being like, yeah, this is a terrible
The game in which you can go around the city murdering people.
Yeah, it didn't have an accurate therapist.
Didn't have an accurate therapist.
Yeah, I was fine with everything else.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, running from the cops
that.
and just disguising yourself and getting away forever. Yeah.
Cheat codes, fine with that.
Fine with that. Yeah. Hijack an airplane, no pilot training whatsoever, fly across the city. Yeah.
Fine.
Hole in one. But the Friedlander
therapist,
guy
I didn't like
felt
that
off.
guy.
His
didn't
voice,
like that.
his tone was a little too edgy for me. Yeah.
Lost me.
Yeah. In The Sopranos, obviously it's a mafia family. And Tony Soprano's kind of, you're watching his story go through all the seasons of Sopranos, and it starts with him being overcome, and he's this very good actor, and so Tony Soprano in the show, he is this, grim, straight-faced, unshakable guy who's doing these horrific things, but his guilt or something's finally eating at him, and so it starts off with him talking to a therapist, and he's talking about ducks. That he walked into his pool in the backyard because there was ducks back there, and he was really excited about it. And she's like, okay. And he's like, there's something wrong with me. Like, that's weird. And so it's a big, huge tension because he is a very important mafioso. The cops want to get him. His rivals want to get him. And here's this therapist who knows all of his secrets.
Right.
And so it's a very interesting dynamic. In that one, I thought she was portrayed pretty well. She comes off pretty even-handed. She's interested in him.
That is interesting.
Okay. In the beginning. I haven't seen all the seasons.
I'm watching Sopranos right now.
Okay.
Which I've never seen it before, but I'm in season 2 right now.
I need to rewatch that.
It's a good show. And it seems to me that the character is portrayed as not a terribly good therapist.
Okay. I only remember seeing certain scenes with her. I remember being impressed that she tries to create a boundary with him. But throughout the seasons, I believe that there's a lot of difficulty with that.
That's the thing, is there's a lot of boundary crossing.
Right. Because he develops a crush on her at one point. I remember that.
That's early, or I mean, at least as I've seen, it's early.
It's
on.
early.
Maybe
It's early because I haven't seen very
I don't
much.
know.
I've probably seen most of seasons 1 and 2. years ago, back whenever it was actually on HBO officially. And I remember that. I remember she had good boundaries with that. I remember her like trying to reflexively ask him questions. And I remember now I know what she was doing. When I watched it, I didn't. But like, there's times whenever he's being resistant and he's not like opening up about something, but you can tell he wants to. And like, I thought she did a pretty good job of like artfully bringing him a question that he could answer that gave him permission to express. And that was a big part of the dynamic, because like, here's this guy who's literally killed people. Expressing emotion is dangerous for him because he could be vulnerable and killed. And she becomes a person that he can. I think that's pretty interesting. But then later on, she also has all the secrets. So then it's like, okay, she's got to kind of be protected or like killed. And that's a problem too.
What are the things that you've heard about her being a bad therapist?
Well, no, it seems as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, she's being portrayed. She's a very human character.
Yes, that I like.
Very flawed.
Yeah,
as that is. But I mean, she does. I mean, she definitely crosses some boundaries in there. That she kind of. I don't want to ruin the show for anyone, but I mean, she dumps him as a therapist for a while. Eventually, like, goes back to him and asks him to re-engage in therapy with her.
Oh, wow.
But does it for her.
Oh.
Does it because she is upset with herself that she dumped him as a client.
See, that feels real. That feels real. You're intimidated by a mafioso. You're trying to get out of this because you're like, this doesn't feel safe. I don't like knowing what's going on. I want to.
But then says like, oh, I like he needed help.
Yes.
And I refused to help him.
And I'm one of the only humans who can.
And now I'm going to go back and ask him to re-engage.
I don't know about the process of that, but I will say there
were parts of it where I was like, I get this. You know, it's a good. It's good storytelling and it's a good character.
Right.
It seems like it might not be the best therapist.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, but I think that for a depiction of our profession, I could see that happening. And like you and I working in drug and alcohol addiction, and you know, we've absolutely encountered humans who, as part of the game, if they were a dealer or, you know, especially whenever we worked for the state-funded program, we were getting a lot of people who, they were being sent to us right from prison.
Right.
And this is their chance to prove that they're getting better. And these individuals sometimes would walk around our camp. Well, I was up at the camp. But, like, they would walk around the camp and other people knew who they were.
Right.
And were very scared of them and being very polite to them. And then later on you discover, like, that individual is a not nobody member of a gang or something like that. And I know as a therapist, there's times when you're intimidated by that because now they're starting to tell you things and you're thinking, okay, A, like I'm okay with that, but like B, I don't want them to be afraid that I know too much. But at the same time, I want them to feel safe and free to open up. So there is a juggling. Like I can kind of resonate with what that fictional therapist would have felt like.
I mean, the good thing for Jim is that no one has ever felt like he's known too much.
Yeah. I've never been accused of that. People are like just trying. Like
you
Jim's
know
trying
a
his
lot
best.
about soda.
I do. See, that's my
but
niche.
unless Pepsi and Coca-Cola are going to come after you.
So
but...
those two therapists I think are interesting. I've always been a fan of Bob Newhart. I like the Bob Newhart show.
I forgot about Bob Newhart.
I just really like, because that was such a great character for his comedy style. You know, with his like flat, straight man comedy style that's reacting to the weirdness of the moment and is sort of baffled by it.
Yeah.
Or also Dr. Katz. I liked that one too.
I didn't actually get into that. I saw just
Celebrity
a couple
Therapist
episodes, but
that was always
hilarious.
a good bit too. Dr. Katz was fun.
Good Will Hunting.
Oh yeah, Robin Williams,
my ultimate favorite.
One of the best.
Yeah.
Best depictions of our trade. I think. Also gets to be a hero in the story, which is really cool that he mattered. Right. And the actor who played him won an Academy Award, which is pretty freaking cool. So yeah.
So I thought that was probably one of the better depictions of therapy.
Yeah.
The Departed, I said this before in a previous episode, Departed is probably one of the worst.
There's a therapist in The Departed?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, she was the court-appointed therapist through the Department of Corrections that the guy has to see. He's mandated as part of his parole.
Okay.
And they end up sleeping together.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I mean, wait, so you're saying bad depiction. Okay,
right.
Got it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's frowned upon. It's frowned upon, especially the court-ordered of therapists. But it's sad because, you know, we got a letter a few episodes ago from somebody in the UK that shared with us that, that did happen. You know, I did sleep with my therapist, and here's kind of what's happened with that. So
Didn't say unrealistic.
Nope, just
bad.
Just bad. Just very bad. And, you know, final note on this topic, unless you have another. So I guess I cringe, I think, at a lot of the depictions. I think anybody would, if you're watching a finely nuanced profession be portrayed to fit a plot.
Oh, yeah. Anybody, if you watch a movie about your profession.
You're going to cringe.
You're going to be very critical about it.
I mean, like, obviously, even in Good Will Hunting, it's like Robin Williams, I think he's doing a lot of techniques, like when it comes to questioning. I mean, he's doing them in this, like, Crayola way that are not nuanced, that are clearly the demonstration of how to do that, like how you demonstrate the questioning to grad school, not how you'd really use it in a real session with a human being. So that was, not good. But then, he also chokes out Matt Damon. So, that's not good. They don't generally do that.
That's true.
Yeah. When your patient criticizes your artwork.
Jacob's like, we do that in life coaching all the time.
I mean, life coaching, very blurry. Very blurry on the ethical boundaries.
Lighten up.
Yeah. You gotta have an open mind to that. Dr. Phil is hard to watch.
Yes.
Dr. Phil's always been really hard to watch for me.
Well, who raised him?
Well, and of course, famously not a therapist.
Yeah.
Right.
Not a licensed
Not anymore.
practitioner.
No. And he needs to not be in order to do what he does, because what he does is so confrontational, and I've said that before on the show. Drew, I think I've always admired him for actually being intelligent, and I think he really wants to answer questions in a thoughtful and meaningful way. And I think if Drew is guilty of any sin, it's sometimes being too academic and too, like, it comes off pompous sometimes, and he's not as casual as I think he could be. But I'm actually good with that, because I think that I like him being a good ambassador of the field. He's also a psychiatrist, so he tends to field more medical questions than psychotherapy questions anyway. So, yeah, good question, writer. Hey, last quick point because we referenced the letter we got from the UK with the person who had a romantic relationship with her therapist. As you're hearing this is recorded in early August. Of course, you're hearing it in the future in late August. But we actually received a message on Twitter from somebody who just said to us, hey, listen, I heard that episode, and man, that meant so much to me, because I also have had a romantic relationship.
I didn't see that.
Yeah. So we received a message. It was an entire conversation that I had with the person. And the person basically shared, here's my story. It wasn't, for air, so I'm not reading it.
Right.
But just said, it meant so much to me to hear that discussed, and really applauded us and said, you guys handled that so well. And to hear therapists talk about it the way you did, it mattered to me. Like, that was healing for me. And that easily could have been a minefield for me to listen to. And it turned out really good.
Awesome.
And so to Becky in the UK, I believe was the writer of the original letter, this person wanted us to pass a word to you and say thank you for writing in about that. It meant a lot to the writer. And the writer was very grateful for it.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah. Also, that writer also from the UK.
Oh.
A lot going on in the UK.
So listen up, UK.
Yeah, Jesus, England. What's going on? I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm sure that we could dig up a lot of skeletons in America, too, but yikes.
Those licensing boards over there.
I don't know what the hell's going on in the UK, but they need to grow some teeth on their therapists and keep people in order. But great question, John the Scoopricon. Thank you for writing in about therapists in the media. They are almost always not correctly portrayed, but I'm glad that people are made more aware of our profession. I will say this, one positive note on the way we're portrayed. I do not think that we are frequently portrayed as a bad thing. I think we're almost always portrayed as generally benign.
Good or neutral.
Yeah.
Sometimes quirky.
A side issue to keep the plot interesting and moving.
Yeah, or a way to dial into the protagonist a little bit, and then a little bit of a sideshow. Fine. But, like, I appreciate that when it comes to confronting stigma, the idea that talking to a therapist is bad or yucky or whatever,
right.
I don't ever really catch that theme very much.
Yeah.
I also don't consume a lot of media, so
right.
I probably am not the guy that would know this, but yeah.
Good point.
There you go. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss binge eating. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop. It's movie trivia time again.
Do it.
Okay.
Tap.
So, I guarantee your streak is over today.
Oh, okay.
Officially.
Well,
right?
I was really bad the last time. So last time we did movies, I failed.
I'll give you the tagline and the plot summary.
All right.
Can I get the decade? Can I get the decade?
No.
Oh, come on.
If you don't have it, I'll give you who starred in it, and that will help you.
All right.
Lightning round between me and Jacob.
Okay.
Go.
Okay. Tagline: Where love cuts as deep as a dagger. Plot summary: A cynical American expatriate struggles to decide whether he should or should not help his former lover and her fugitive husband escape from French Morocco.
Not Without My Daughter.
No.
First Blood.
No.
Double
Rambo.
Jeopardy. Rambo.
Okay, starring Humphrey Bogart and
come-
Ingrid Bergman.
Oh.
Gone with the Wind.
No.
No.
That's all I got. That was it.
The name just flew out of my head.
Casablanca.
Yes.
Holy
There you go.
shit!
Yeah.
Yes!
You were just naming
I have
movies.
no clue. I have never seen Casablanca.
That is what I was trying to think
Yeah,
of.
I have
The name
no
flew out of my head
clue.
right before I said it.
Yeah.
Oh, no. No, that was an accident. But you know what? Broken clock is right twice a day. Winning's
Yes.
winning. I'll take it however I can get it.
Ah,
Oh,
that
damn,
one,
that felt good.
That one hurt.
Oh, man. No,
It's only one of the most famous movies ever, Joe.
I've
Right.
never seen it. I've never seen a lot of the most famous movies ever. Very pleased with myself. Binge eating. Hey guys, I'm struggling with binge eating and emotional eating. I've got a lot better over the past year, but I still can't eat unhealthy food without it affecting my whole day and totally ruining my routine. I go to the supermarket almost every day. I spend way too much money on food, even if I know it will get me in financial trouble, and sometimes all I do is eat junk all day for weeks. So, my question is, how do you manage to eat healthy with binge eating? I also have ADD, which is attention deficit disorder. If that's relevant, thanks.
Okay.
Really good question.
Yeah.
First thing we should note is you need to go back an episode, Ryder, because we had a eating disorders expert come on the show and do an interview with me. And in that interview, she discusses all the different eating disorders, most of them anyway. And she discusses binge eating disorder as a specific thing, as distinct from anorexia and distinct from bulimia. And that seems to be what you're describing, which is this overeating compulsion that you're doing all the time, which she very much equated to addiction.
Did she go into emotional eating at all?
Yeah, in the sense of connecting it to the way addicts tend to try to self-soothe and self-medicate, that fundamentally that's what you're doing
Right.
with that. And
Yeah.
it's a fascinating thing because even toward the end of the interview, she did discuss a little bit the biomechanics. Actually, this part wasn't recorded, but she and I kind of had an offline conversation too, where she was telling me about a new disorder. I think it was called like RFID or something like that. But it has to do with whenever your body cannot detect the hunger hormone. Because interesting little fun fact, and she was explaining this to me. I thought, man, it's really cool. So like whenever you eat food, when you're hungry, what is the feeling of hunger? What is happening? Because it's a biochemical response.
Right.
And so there's two chemicals that are happening in the stomach lining, one being leptin and peptid YY, and one being ghrelin. And basically the way it works is that whenever your stomach lining contracts, because there's nothing in there being digested, the lining starts to shrivel and wrinkle, right? Which is fine.
Right.
It's contracting. In its contracted state, it starts to produce some of those biochemicals. I believe it's peptid YY and ghrelin, or leptin. And that's the hunger sensation. And once that starts to permeate in your blood, you start to feel hungry. Once you start eating, that food gets down there, and it immediately starts to expand the stomach lining. And then once it's expanded, your stomach lining starts to excrete something called ghrelin, which is the full feeling. Ghrelin takes 20 to 30 minutes to saturate your bloodstream so that you can actually feel a sensation of stop eating, I'm full. And so what Debbie was also explaining to me is that there's some people who have a disorder where those biochemicals are not working correctly. And so their brain is not registering full.
Right.
And so they're just eating because it's just hunger. And also this happens as part of the biochemical process. Obviously, the more we eat, the larger we get. And what's happening? Our stomach lining with the rest of our body is expanding. And that's causing a sensation where you have to put more in there to keep it completely expanded, so that the ghrelin actually comes out into your system. So this is why it becomes this tolerance process, like similar to addiction.
Right.
And so, yeah, she did talk about that. It was a little bit offline, though.
Interesting. Well, and that was actually one of the things that I was going to get at too, is being able to recognize the difference between physical hunger
Right.
and emotional hunger.
Yes.
Because this is where we get the term comfort food,
Right.
right? Where we seek out food to make us feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually found this website that was kind of interesting. It's called helpguide.org. And it actually talks about some of the differences between hunger, physical hunger, and emotional hunger.
Okay.
So you can identify which it is that you're dealing with. So some of the things that they talk about is that emotional hunger comes on suddenly.
Yes.
Whereas physical hunger is going to be a slower process.
You're going to notice a little
Right.
bit. Yeah.
Emotional hunger, you're usually craving a specific food or a specific texture or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to be tied more to emotional hunger than
Yeah.
physical hunger. Because if you're physically hungry, you're just hungry. You
Right.
just need something to eat.
Yeah,
right? It doesn't
anything
really
would
matter.
work.
Right.
That's the physical sensation of hunger. When it becomes emotional and mental, you're fixating on a thing. You want whatever you just saw in the commercial or
Right.
whatever's in your mind.
Yeah, and there are some other things in here too, as far as like, emotional hunger isn't satisfying once you're full, but that doesn't really
Right.
help to identify it. But I think one thing that would be really helpful, and we used to do this all the time at a drug and alcohol treatment program that I worked at before, where we actually had a nutritionist come in once a week
Yeah.
and do a nutrition group with the clients.
Yeah.
And the reason why that's so important is because if you're struggling with emotionally eating, is kind of like what Debbie was talking about, where you've got all these different biochemicals and stuff that maybe they're not working how they're supposed to be working.
Right.
In the same sense that if you had your heart that's not working the way it's supposed to be working, then we introduce a man-made object to regulate it.
Okay.
Like a pacemaker.
Yes.
Right? You do kind of the same thing to manage this.
Okay.
And that man-made object is you keeping track of your food and your calories.
Yeah.
So if you know that you're eating 3 balanced meals a day and you're watching your calorie intake, then you know if I'm feeling hungry, that must be emotional hunger.
Right.
Because I'm staying on top of my food.
Yeah.
So my body is actually getting the fuel that it needs. So I can easily identify this as being an emotional component,
Right.
not a physical component. And then once you've done that, like that's the hardest part.
Right.
Once you've been able to identify that and separate that, then you can develop some coping skills of how to manage emotion, how to redirect that energy that you have
Yeah.
into doing something about it that isn't eating food, and then dealing with it that way so that you don't end up just binge eating
Yes.
to deal with emotions.
Well, and also another thing Debbie talked about on the record in the interview, she talked about food journaling being a
Yes.
really important part of it.
Yes.
And it was amazing as she was telling me about the technique she uses to treat this. It is hand in hand, the things that we do with addiction. And so she was like, noticing where your emotions are in a given moment. Are you hungry or are you bored? Are you feeling less than? Is something bothering you? Is something causing fear? Are you feeling sadness? Are you just feeling lackluster? Are you feeling disengaged? All of these things you're going to be tempted to self-medicate with food.
Yes.
It's possible you're describing exactly why people are gaining weight during a COVID lockdown.
I was
think
just
that's
thinking that.
happening.
I mean,
Yeah.
all of those things apply to
Yeah.
everyone who's locked down, everyone who's out of work.
True.
Yeah, that 100%. That I'm going through that right now.
Yeah.
Because my diet has gone to shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just had powdered donuts.
I watched you.
this
I
morning.
watched you do that.
I wouldn't say
Whole
I never
sleeve of
used to do
donuts.
that.
It just happened.
No, that
Sponsor
was
the show,
No,
donuts.
the other sleeve I ate in the car.
Oh.
Oh,
Okay.
That's the other component you're missing
Let's
here.
talk about the hiding behavior.
he bought powdered donuts at Sam's Club.
Let's talk about the hiding behavior. You know what's interesting, though? Not to make light of it, just because it's relevant, I'm going to point it
Right.
out. People that do have binging disorders or overeating disorders, and if you think about it as an addiction, that's actually a very common thing. They're going out to dinner with friends. They'll stop on the way,
Yeah.
eat secret meals, and then go out with the friends. That way
Right.
they can eat a normal portion with the friends and not feel like they're overdoing it.
Yeah.
It's a very common
And
thing.
What I'm finding, I'm having to force myself now, because at the beginning of the COVID lockdown, and I'm calling it lockdown.
Right,
We
the
know
era. Yeah.
whatever it is now.
Sequestering.
And as we all know, I'm still unemployed.
Yeah.
My whole industry has been shut down, except for podcasting.
yeah.
And so, what I have found, the whole first part of it, I was losing weight. I was doing a lot of work around the house. I had a lot of projects to do, and I was losing weight. I was still being really active. Since then, I don't have as many projects to do now. I've run out of things that I'd already bought materials for, and so now it's like, oh well, now I've got this project that I can do, but it's going to be $3,500 in materials.
Right.
Yep.
Don't want to spend that right now. I have a ceiling that I want to redo.
Right.
I mean, that ceiling's fine.
Yeah.
The ceiling there is fine. I don't love the look of it. I'd like to redo it, but it's also not gonna fall
Optional.
in.
Yeah.
And it's not ugly. I mean, it's not in disrepair. I mean, it just
doesn't
looks
become
like
a
what
high
it is.
enough priority that
Exactly.
it's worth the expense.
And So I'm doing all that. And so the last month or so, I've definitely gained weight. And I'm back up. Like, I've basically regained all the weight that I lost at the beginning of COVID.
Oh, wow.
And I'm probably like a pound or two heavier than I was then. So now this is probably a month ago, the last time I weighed myself. I don't weigh myself often. And so now to combat that, I'm giving myself basically one big meal a day.
Okay.
But I separate it. So I don't eat breakfast.
Okay.
So, for instance, yesterday for lunch, I made myself a chicken breast, a baked chicken breast that I served over rice.
Oh, wow.
But this chicken breast was big, and it's like balsamic and all that stuff.
Sure.
It's not quite plain, but whatever. That's not important. This was a big chicken breast. This is like, I don't know, close to a pound. Probably like 0.75 pounds, something like that.
Good portion.
Big chicken breast. Too big for a meal. So I make myself that meal, put the whole thing on the plate. I ate about half of it.
Okay.
Put the rest in the fridge, and then that's dinner.
Okay. Yeah. That
And
way
so-
you can control.
And so I've got one big meal that I'm splitting into two.
I see what you're doing.
Probably a little smaller than an average size meal, I guess. I don't know what an average.
So
size
let me
meal
ask
is.
you about the strategy of that, though. So, like, versus if you didn't have something planned that you had set aside, you might just keep picking and grazing and making things throughout the day.
Or I just make a whole different meal.
I see. So if you make the one with intention, it's like, okay, no, that's already made.
Right.
Eat that.
Like I've got it.
It's done.
Yeah.
So I don't want it to go to waste. I'm going to eat that.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, it's also healthy. So I got ahead of the problem.
Right.
I like that.
My issue is boredom. I eat out of boredom a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, and I never weigh myself. My scale actually doesn't work. I need to replace the battery in it. But I know that my body's changed. I've lost a lot of muscle mass and I've put on a lot of fat. And I can feel it because my t-shirts don't fit the same way anymore.
They're not
like
snug
my
anymore.
clothes
They're
don't
not snug
fit.
on the chest.
No.
Right.
They're snug on the belly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The snugness seems to be falling.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah. Welcome to my world. I get you.
But like it's I don't have a whole lot going on, and whenever I'm sitting watching TV, I have to have something. I have to be eating something.
Yeah.
And so I have to try to avoid TV as much as I can. If I can avoid TV, I usually avoid eating terrible foods.
But see, this is where food journaling writer, I think, comes in handy. And again, it doesn't have to be this proper process. We just want you to start noticing not just, the food I ate today and the calories I took in today, which is valuable, like as anything you measure, you manage, but it's also this idea of like noticing what's happening in the background. For Jacob, it's boredom. It's not having anything to do with busy his hands. For Nick, it's also boredom. It's the sense of like, well, I'm watching something. I resonate with both of those. Like if I'm sports is a big one for me. Like if sports is on, I have to, it's funny that we talked about Sober October because last year, Sober October, we went through this and I actually did a whole experiment where I think I'm going to do it again this year and see if I can cut down a few pounds. That'd be a really good idea. But definitely, writer, we want you to use those techniques from the last episode. Also starting to notice how you can create interference patterns. That's kind of what Jacob's doing. He's creating an interference pattern by not just leaving it to see what happens. He's intentionally creating his meal and placing it there. That way it's ready. And it's just sort of like he's planned it out so that future him doesn't have to make a bad decision. Future him has something ready to go.
The other thing that I do sometimes that is very helpful is I never tell myself I can't have something.
Okay.
But instead, I put conditions behind it, which is like, I can have this thing if I want, but first I have to eat this thing.
Okay.
Because like if I've got Oreo cookies, I really want
first
some
I need
Oreo
to have this
cookies.
chocolate cake.
No,
I see where you're going.
No. So yeah, I'll be something like, okay, yes, the cookies, those can be dessert, but first I have to eat, this chicken breast and this steamed broccoli.
Right.
And because I know that by doing that, I'm
Here's why that won't work. For me.
Okay.
For Jim, that doesn't work. Here's why. Because after I eat the broccoli and noodles or whatever was in the fridge, I'm like,
time.
well, I did this so I could get to those Oreos. I'm eating those Oreos. And my body's like, but Jim, we're not hungry anymore. And I'm like, you shut your mouth, okay? I didn't ask you if you're hungry. I said, we're going to have those Oreos.
This ain't about you.
This ain't about you. This isn't about survival. Like, what are you talking about?
For me, it works.
I've earned the Oreos.
Because I've done the same thing, too, with soda, where usually when I was doing really well with avoiding that, it was because I never said I can't have it.
Right.
I said, okay, but first I have to drink this canister of water.
Okay, yeah.
And then
you just
usually
don't
by
care
that
anymore.
time, then I'm just... the craving's gone. Because the
Yeah.
cravings don't last forever. That's the other thing people need to remember.
Right.
Your average craving isn't going to last longer. I can't remember how long it is, but it's a very short period of time. There's
Yeah.
actually research, and now I'm talking on my ass because
Well,
I'm quoting stuff that I don't
Why
have in
stop
front of
now?
me.
You've been doing it for
But-
a long time.
But the craving doesn't
Period?
last long. You can outweight cravings.
Oh, yeah. I see
you
what you're
know?
saying. Yeah, cravings
So,
pass in like 15,
exactly.
20 minutes, something like
Yeah,
that. We've seen
it's
data on
very short. So drink that water first, and then by
Yeah.
the time you're done with that water, see how you feel. Because at that
Yes.
point, you may not really crave it anymore.
Yeah, and to the writer, one more quick tip, because you mentioned that you're having trouble shopping, and when you shop, you tend to fill up the cart with all the junky stuff. Here's the way that I would kind of offer you to challenge that. Too often, we say, you know what you need to do? You need to get out a recipe book, you need a meal plan, and you need to get all the best meals that you can think of, and then write down those ingredients, and then go buy everything, and then build it all up in one day and put it in the fridge. That don't work for everybody. I've heard somebody tell me once, the best diet is the one you can stick to. And I think that's intimidating to fill up your cart with all the healthy things and go home with nothing that you wanted. Because I think you just won't eat it. I think you're going to start calling DoorDash.
I have a method for the grocery shopping.
Okay.
I have no idea if this will work for anyone else.
All right.
So I've been watching the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance on Netflix. I finally finished
so
that
good.
up. I watched the first few episodes when it was coming out, and then I've just watched the last of them now. And one thing that Michael Jordan famously did before a big game or maybe during a game or something like that is he would literally
Take
just
a dump.
make something up.
Oh.
He would just imagine something.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm playing this one-on-one game against Nick. Nick told me that I suck.
Okay, so he would get himself...
And then he'd just get pissed off at Nick.
Oh, wow.
And then and then go out there and
play with a chip on his shoulder.
the first half in this game, I scored 12 points. Nick scored 25. Man, I didn't have a good half.
Even though that wasn't
Holy
true.
shit. Nick just came up to me and said that I suck.
Yeah.
As he was going into the locker room at halftime. So I came out that second half and I scored 40 points on Nick,
I'll show
and I
him.
held him to 2.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Nick's like, "What the hell?"
Yeah,
Right.
why is he so angry?
And there are stories
He's
of
trying to
this.
be his friend.
Yeah.
There are stories of this where, like, years later, somebody will ask Michael Jordan, like, "Hey, you said that Nick said that you suck going into halftime. Nick says he doesn't remember doing that. What's up with that?" And Michael will just kind of laugh and go, like, "Yeah, he never said that.
Yeah.
I made that up to fire myself up."
Yeah.
So
Wow.
my method when I go into the grocery store, if I'm like, "Oh, I need to get some decent food," it doesn't have to be necessarily health food, big quotes, but I want to get just reasonable food. And I could get a thing of ice cream. I do like a thing of ice cream, but if I get a thing of ice cream, I'm going to eat it.
Yeah.
And I don't need the thing of ice cream. That's I don't have to have that. So I have it in my head. I'm going to check out,
Uh-huh.
and the cashier is going to judge what is in my cart,
That's funny.
which is not true at all.
Right.
Of course,
Yeah.
the cashier does not give 2 shits.
Yeah,
what is in
right.
my grocery cart?
Yeah. But
But in my mind, I'm like, the cashier is going to judge me
I
when
like that.
I get out of it, when I'm on my way out.
kind of run through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea. Kind of creating a fictional scenario to help you stay in the right
You know, and
context.
honestly, that is the only reason I'm not eating Cinnamon Toast Crunch 3 meals a day is because I don't want the cashier to see me buying all those
Yeah,
boxes.
you don't need that many boxes.
Yeah.
Also, you need to stop eating
You don't
Cinnamon
want a
Toast
pallet
Crunch.
of cinnamon toast
Yeah.
crunch.
No, let me tell you
Because
about
if
the
you
new
do that,
thing.
the cashier will judge you.
Yeah.
Listen, next time you're in the cereal aisle, okay, they have something called s'mores now. And it's basically Cinnamon Toast Crunch with chocolate and marshmallows.
I don't want that. I want
God,
Cinnamon
it's
Toast Crunch.
so good. But listen, I'm with you on the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. That's actually the right idea. So I like Jacob's theory. I was just going to say, look for the better things that you do buy. Do more of that. Don't try to go all or nothing. Try to phase into something better. A lot of times what stops us from getting better is we say, "Oh, well, that isn't good enough. I'm already wet, I may as well go swimming. So I'll go order 3 Whoppers." Well, listen, if you only had 1 Whopper, that's a win.
Right.
You don't have to have a stalk of broccoli.
Yeah, I've
it's
heard a lot of
okay.
people talk about that. And it's like you don't have
Yeah.
to change all your eating habits. You just
Right.
need to change quantity.
Look at something that you
of
had
eating
last week
habits.
that was a decent meal. Something that you'd say, well, that one wasn't absolute garbage. I made myself spaghetti and noodles. And you think, oh, spaghetti noodles are just carbs and sauce isn't that healthy. Okay, hold on. If that was the best meal that you had last week, I want you to absolutely factor that one into this next week. And I want you to think of one other meal you like that's on par with spaghetti. Get that into this next week.
Yeah.
That's it. I just want us to have a few things that are in the gray zone or
Yeah.
a little bit better, it's about progress, not perfection.
Yep.
Big win there, writer. But good luck with this, my friend. And remember about organizations like Overeaters Anonymous. I believe it was called NEDA. I might be saying that wrong. Go back to our original episode. But there's
Episode 137.
Yeah, episode 137. Double check on that. But, this gets better if you treat it like an addiction. If you look at it and say, what are the underlying causes of this? Where are my emotions? What am I self-medicating? What habits have I developed? And then starting to create interference plays so that you can kind of get a hold of the behavior before it happens. Feeling a craving is fine. Cravings will pass. If you remind yourself of that and know what's happening when it's happening, that's when things can get better. So give yourself that. I think you'll get some real results.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much for writing in. All right. We are going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss anxiety and schizophrenia. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is Dr. Ben Don. Today's second trivia question in honor of TheraProducer Ben is, tagline, put a fence in front of these men and they'll climb it. The plot summary. Allied prisoners of war plan for several hundred of their number to escape from a German
Hogan's
camp
Heroes.
during World War II.
Surge!
What is it,
It's
Jacob?
not Hogan's Heroes?
It's The Great Escape.
The Great Escape. Starring Steve McQueen,
Yeah.
James Garner, and Richard Attenborough. Yes, that Richard Attenborough.
Great movie.
Great movie. Yeah, I saw it for the first time this past week.
Huh.
The soundtrack does not fit with the movie.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen it in quite a while.
When we first started watching, I was like, "Oh, is this supposed to be a comedy?" Because the music with it it kind of has a comedy feel to it.
It's a World War II
And then,
camp.
yeah,
and
I
it's
even-
like
yes. Yes.
I mean, there are kind of comedic moments in it.
There are, but like I even mentioned to Laura, I was like, I didn't realize the Germans were so happy-go-lucky about the war.
Yeah.
That they were just like, "Oh, you crazy prisoners and your escape attempts."
Shenanigans.
Yeah. But then, like, the way that it ends, it's like, oh, damn. Like,
Oh, it's on.
that's serious.
They do take it they take it seriously.
Yeah, yeah.
This is something we don't talk
Good
enough
movie.
about in the media. There's not enough humanizing of the Nazis, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the point I was making.
Yeah, I think that's where I was hearing.
Well, we've had Laura on the show.
Yeah, well, that's true. She's explained what it was really like and how they really felt about these kinds of things. All right, good job, Jacob. Tip of the cap. This question says, can anxiety develop into schizophrenia? If a person has had anxiety, can it later develop into something worse? Good question.
Well, okay, those are two different questions.
Yeah,
Can anxiety develop into something worse?
correct. That's
Versus
one question.
can anxiety develop into schizophrenia? Can anxiety develop into schizophrenia? No.
No.
I don't know if anxiety can develop into another disorder.
No.
It can't. Anxiety can definitely get worse itself
Yes.
as a disorder. But yeah, anxiety isn't a disorder.
Schizophrenia
that's going
is a medical condition, right?
well, technically, we could say that about any medical or mental health disorder.
It's definitely more of a full.
It's got more of a
condition.
biological component.
That's
to it.
that's what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not medical condition, but yeah,
Right.
there is something physical in schizophrenia that
Kinda.
may or may not exist in just in depression.
Yeah. Let's take a moment. Let's talk about what schizophrenia
Tell
is.
me about this because
teach you about schizophrenia.
I'm trying to learn about it.
Yeah.
So I know they've done studies on like the ventricle areas in the brain that are actually larger for folks with schizophrenia, but that's not a cause and effect determination.
Right.
It's correlation at this point.
We
They
still
what
don't know what
exactly.
the smoking gun is.
Right.
But
Okay.
a person who has schizophrenia, it is a lot more of a deeply rooted thing than like anxiety. A person with anxiety, there's a lot of times when they're not anxious and they're just going around being what they are. And then they can tell you, oh, this specific thing provoked anxiety inside of me. Schizophrenia, unlike that, has a lot of pieces to it that are kind of really always there. There's delusions is usually one of the criteria, and that's whenever somebody misinterprets the world around them. So that could be a patient who says, I feel like there are people watching me. I feel like the television is sending me secret messages, warning me about what not to do and what to do. I feel like, the stars are talking to me. I've had patients tell me that. The stars are talking to them and there's messages from the aliens. I feel like the president is asking me to do something for him. I feel like people are out to get me. That's usually the most common one. If I leave my house, somebody out there is plotting to murder me. I don't know who it is. They're not Hallucinating, it's a delusion. It's a false interpretation of the whole world around them. So that's one of the criteria. Another one is hallucinations, and that can be audio or visual. So visuals in schizophrenia are usually I'm seeing shadow people. And, I see these shadow figures that are moving around. Sometimes it's a very visceral, very vivid hallucination where literally they'll look in the mirror and they'll see something terrifying, or something like that. And then audio hallucinations are the voices. A lot of times people hear voices. Sometimes it's benign. It's just voices around them, but it's indistinct and there's nothing there. Sometimes it's persecutory, voices that are saying terrible things to them or telling them to do terrible things, that they're a terrible person. And then the last thing is usually what we call negative symptoms. Your things like flat affect or the absence of emotionality, the absence of expressiveness, verbal absences, or word salad where they're just saying, words that don't actually mean anything. And so when you have those criteria all together in the same person for 6 months or longer, that's when we're starting to notice what we call schizophrenia. And schizophrenia is actually a German word, which means split mind. And a lot of people misunderstood that to mean that that's multiple personality disorder. That's not what we mean. We mean that the mind is double tapping, right? It's hearing and seeing things that aren't there. It's perceiving extra things that aren't there. It's at war with itself. And so that's where that word comes from. So yeah, to answer the question, anxiety and schizophrenia are two fundamentally different things. However, it is very common that a person who is living with schizophrenia has anxiety. Right. Because they're deluding themselves, or not deluding themselves, but they're experiencing delusions, believing that there's people out to get them, or that the air is toxic, or that the water is poisoned, or something's wrong.
So we usually, when we talk about anxiety, we talk about kind of everybody has anxiety. Right. Everybody experiences anxiety. What makes it a disorder isn't the symptoms of anxiety. It's the presence or non-presence of the threat. So if you're experiencing anxiety for no particular reason, then that's the anxiety disorder. Right. So then it becomes really weird when we talk about schizophrenia, because to the outside world, you're experiencing anxiety without an actual threat. Right. But within their world, there is an actual threat.
Yes.
So
their anxiety sensors are probably working correctly.
You're right. Yeah. That's the point I'm making.
It's getting bad data.
So it's, exactly. So you wouldn't necessarily have somebody typically diagnosed with an anxiety disorder if the anxiety is a response to their schizophrenia.
Correct. Yeah. When you're doing your differential diagnosis, you're probably going to select schizophrenia versus schizophrenia and also generalized anxiety disorder. Right. Generally. And another thing that often happens alongside schizophrenia is obsessive and compulsive disorder. And we don't talk enough about that, but a lot of people don't know that obsessive and compulsive disorder is that tendency to fixate on a thought so much that you must behave or do something to make it feel safe again. Right. So it's that thought of like, oh man, I need to go downstairs and relock the door. Maybe the door's not locked. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, you can't go to sleep now because your brain's telling you have to, something's wrong. And then you go downstairs, you check it, you have to do the lock 3 times to double check, triple check, make sure it's locked. You get back upstairs again. That pattern can be OCD. That often does pair really well with schizophrenia because schizophrenia becomes this fearfulness and this delusion and constantly, in a state of danger, which can also be a problem too. Yeah. But no, anxiety cannot grow into this other thing. They are different things. They have anxiousness in common because anxiousness is one of those basic things that humans do. In the same way that sadness. Can depression become OCD? No. Are OCD people often depressed?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. So those things couple together. Mm-hmm. So yeah, to the writer, if you're fearful because you have anxiety and you're afraid that it's going to escalate into something else, no, that's not how mental illness works. Though it is possible, if you're having other symptoms, that those symptoms need to be examined as well. Right. And there might be more to learn. Yeah. But that's not the case that you just have one.
I mean, so this is at least one less thing that this person can be anxious about.
Right.
Yeah. Unless you're having some of those symptoms of the criteria I went over for schizophrenia, it doesn't sound like that's something you're dealing with.
I mean, the good news is that the only thing your anxiety can turn into is worse anxiety.
Yeah.
That's probably the big concern.
Trust me, writer, I've had anxiety for an awfully long time, and it's never. I will argue that anxiety. I don't know that anxiety turns into depression, but we do consider it to be a co-occurring thing. We usually say that anxiety and depression are two sides of the same coin, usually because the same thought distortions that are allowing you to misperceive situations to cause anxiousness will also be thought distortions that will cause you to become depressed and scared and hopeless. And a lot of times we get depressed about our anxiety too, and that's a bummer. So in that sense, yes, there are things that are co-occurring, but it'd be a misunderstanding to say they are the same thing. They're not.
Right.
Even
Yeah.
if they all live in the same sandbox.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the big message here is don't worry about your anxiety turning into something greater, but do address your anxiety. That's not a green light to not address it.
One of the biggest mistakes of people who have anxiety is that we rule out the anxiety and fixate on possibility. And it's a shame because we need to see everything through the awareness that we have anxiety first. We think, okay, Jim, this could be anxiety or a heart attack. Let me focus on the heart attack thing. And I'll say, no. Start with the anxiety thing.
Right.
But what if it's a heart attack? Well, then you're going to die anyway, champ. You're going to die anyway because that heart attack is not going to wait. Like, if you're going to die, you're going to die. Or like, whatever it is that you're facing, what if I'm going to develop schizophrenia? Okay, got it. Are you seeing that through the lens of anxiety? Yeah, I already know I have anxiety. But what if I end up with schizophrenia? Okay, that sounds like the way anxiety talks, though.
Right.
Like, do you hear your voice? That's what anxiety says. Anxiety says, what if I turn into schizophrenia?
Right.
What if you're having a heart attack? So if you hear that tone and you learn to recognize that's what anxiety talks like, hear that and focus on that first. Don't worry about the what ifs.
Yep.
Because it won't be.
Yep.
That being said, if you're having a heart attack,
Yeah.
take care of that.
Yeah,
too.
you should go get help. Yeah. I was listening to Pod Therapy the other day, and they said heart attacks aren't real. So I wasn't worried about it. No problem.
Nobody on this show wants you to not get treated for a heart attack.
Yeah. Please
Correct.
get heart attacks checked.
Thank you.
Have a regular relationship with your cardiologist.
Yes.
Great question, though. I think it's something that I hear all the time. People are fearful that, especially if you have anxiety, you tend to be prone to hypochondria, the fear that things could get worse. And your anxiety is the lens through which you see these problems, so of course that's a fear. Especially once you've been officially diagnosed with anxiety, you're like, oh my God, what else is wrong with me? And it's like, no, we're just discussing the symptom. That's what a diagnosis is. Just describing the symptom accurately.
Yeah.
You're not broken.
Yeah.
You get better.
Good question, though. I'm sure a lot of people didn't realize that.
And if you want to look back in our catalog, we actually had a person living with schizophrenia on the show. A hockey teammate of Nick's joined us and described what an entire episode was like, being hospitalized, what treatment looked like for him, becoming medicine compliant and having success with that, getting into therapy, being a part of a hospital as well. And then ultimately getting to a place where that individual perfectly manages their life and just lives with awareness of this. So if you're out there and if we described schizophrenia and that caught your mind, please know that can get better as well.
Yeah, I was actually just trying to find what episode that was, but I can't.
It's under his name. What's his name?
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
I think it's called Living with Anxiety or Living with Schizophrenia.
Yeah, if you go to podtherapy.net, at the top of our website, there's a search bar, and if you just type in schizophrenia, you'll see all the episodes where we discuss it, including this one. But you'll also see an episode in which I think it is titled Living with Schizophrenia. And there's a great interview in there with a person who lives with it. So
I did not realize we had a search feature.
Wow, buddy. Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, it's very useful. If ever anybody writes and is like, oh, have you guys ever talked about this? I just go into the search thing and send it to them.
Schizoaffective disorder.
Okay.
It's episode 79.
79. Great.
Yeah.
Yep. So, if you're out there and you heard some of those symptoms and you thought, man, I'd like to learn more about that, there's also a really great video that I think does a great job and an accurate job of describing schizophrenia. It's through, you go onto YouTube and you type in osmosis. That's the creator is called Osmosis. And they have a video on schizophrenia. It's a drawn cartoon kind of video, but it identifies all the criteria, walks you through it in a very accurate way, very straightforward. I really like that account. Osmosis is a way that I'll use to educate folks about a diagnosis. If they have OCD, anxiety, whatever, I'll send them a video on that. And I count on those to be very accurate. So
awesome.
Very useful. Great question, writer.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you don't have schizophrenia, but you do have anxiety. Deal with that.
Yep.
All right. End of the show. Fun things to talk about. Well, we're recording this in early August, mid-August. God, can you believe it's mid-August?
Yes.
By the time people hear this, it's late
It definitely
August.
feels like it outside.
Yeah, I know. Yes, that's true. And so we don't know. If anybody has become a THERAPAL or THERAPOD or THERADACTYL or ex officio THERAPRODUCER, we don't know about it.
Not yet.
So thank you.
But thank you. Yep. And we'll get you next time.
Yep. And in the next episode, it's going to be the first episode of September anyway. And so we like to thank all of our THERAPODs during that time and THERADACTYLs as well. And so it's a great opportunity to be recognized. So we'll make sure that we do that.
And we especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight and mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the THERAPRODUCERs. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Elio Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Dawn, and ex officio board members Crazy Manata Scoop and Gray Whitaker.
And if you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health. That is all the time that we had for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening this episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting the link provided in your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, on Instagram at PodTherapyGuys.
I think so.
That feels right.
Let's go with that.
And at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangent.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
If you're having a heart attack, go see a doctor.
Please call 911. Call 911.
And go vote Best of Las Vegas.
No. We haven't announced that yet.